Well, yeah, it's that time of year where bugs and viruses and elves and start showing up to wrap presents and put them under the Christmas tree. And so it's the most wonderful time of the year. And so, of course, we're going to talk about Lord of the Rings. It makes sense, right? Lord of the Rings, because they're elves.
Man, I was wondering what you were talking about with the elves and the tree, and because I don't think that's accurate. I think it's Santa that does that.
Well, the elves do all the work. Santa just, he just shows up for the milk and cookies. But at any rate, but this is not a Christmas episode. This is Lord of the Rings and a Game of Thrones, which technically we're going to call it the Song of Ice and Fire, because both these two epic fantasy tales are, they're similar in some ways, but very, very different in one of the most important ways. We'll get to that in a minute. But I do think it's interesting. I think that if you're going to write an epic fantasy, series of novels, you have to have two middle names, and they both have to start with R. So you got to either be a J.R.R. Tolkien, or you have to be a George R.R. Martin. So yeah. So Will, I'm not sure how many middle names you have, or if either of them start with R. I think I'm out of luck. I've just got one. It's Paul. Yeah, so
yep. Yeah, whatever. It's pretentious anyway.
It is. And I wonder, I think I didn't look it up, but I was wondering, was George R.R. Martin born George R.R. Martin, or was he like envious of J.R.R. Tolkien and decided to change his name? I don't know.
Sounds like a stage name to me.
It does. Pen name. Yes. So, but if you like Lord of the Rings, if you like Game of Thrones, or if you love them, one or the other, great. And we're not going to try to mess with either one of them, but we are going to talk about how these are different and the story, or we're going to call it the moral universe that these two epic tales exist within. So it should be fun. For one, I am a Lord of the Rings guy, going back to when I was a teenager and I first read Lord of the Rings. I gave it to my children, and at least one of them has read Lord of the Rings. Madison, I think she read it when she was 11.
Wow,
I was like,
not an easy read.
Not an easy read. And but it's just a fantastic, epic tale. And there are heroes, and there's the villain, right? And there are orcs and dwarves and elves. And really, I don't know that everybody realizes this, but this was the sort of shot that was heard around the world in terms of literature, that Tolkien essentially invented the fantasy genre with first The Hobbit and then Lord of the Rings. So if you like elves and magic and dwarves and orcs and dragons and all of that, well, you can thank J.R.R. Tolkien to thank for that, because those who've written in those genres since followed in his footsteps, including George Rock and Roll Martin. And
I thought it was Ray Romano.
Was it Ray Romano? I was thinking Rock and Roll.
I don't know.
But let's start with what you like, Will. What you like about Lord of the Rings, what you like about Game of Thrones, and then maybe we'll do the don't likes as well. So,
okay.
Where you fall, brother?
So Lord of the Rings, I love. Not even just like, I love Lord of the Rings because it's just a beautiful story. I think the spiritual undertones are just so well delivered in the characters, and it's not like ultra obvious, but it can be at times. And just the story of just I love the setting. I love the world that it's set in. The characters, also just the heroic characters, but also the evil characters, and just the way they interact with one another. There's so many stories happening at the same time, but and they're all happening, and each one of them has their own dynamic. So even just like Frodo and Sam dynamic, right? And then Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli dynamic, right? And then you have the Boromir-Faramir dynamic. Like, there's all these, but then there's one, story, but there's so many characters that you fall in love with along the way, and then you start feeling bad for, and then like it's like Smeagol and Gollum, and all these things have a history. So anyway, and I just thought that the trilogy Peter Jackson did is probably the best trilogy I think has ever been done. It's just a grand epic, beautiful, beautiful way to handle the books in a movie way.
Yeah.
I actually have a poster I'm staring at right now that Elijah Wood and Sean Astin signed for me for the Fellowship. So I'm really into the Fellowship. Fellowship of the Ring, I think, is one of the best starts to a trilogy. Music, come on, just everything, right? And just the level of detail, because I know J.R.R. Tolkien, very detailed, had his own languages, the whole thing. So you can feel that in a story. And then you get Game of Thrones, which is kind of like a newer, modern take, but also set, not in our time. And you can feel that. So it's its own world. It's built, right? There's characters that you like. There's characters you don't like. It's a cool story. There's moments for, a hero. There's moments for the villain. Right. But so in that way, I like it. The dynamics and the characters I like, to a degree. Again, there's many stories going on that you can follow, many characters that are having their own quarrels and own issues within with other characters. And then there's really, really bad villains that finally get it. And that's the part that I like. So there is a good and evil that is presented in kind of an interesting way, not as defined as Lord of the Rings, but there is still a good and like a bad happening. So that's pretty cool. And just the characters in general are pretty innovative and unique and interesting backstories, like cool, like a lot of time to understand characters, a lot of like development that doesn't leave you just confused and like, okay, why do I know all that? It's all development that's like very like, oh, now I'm really interested in this character and where they're going to go because of that development. And I just thought the series on HBO was pretty great, except for the last season. I know there was a lot of things you had to fast forward. There's a lot of stuff that was just not, it was just done, for the world, if you want to put it that way. Just very like over the top, very gore, and just like the graphic sex and the whole thing. Like, if you can kind of get through that, this series is actually made very, very well. And it will keep you glued for quite a bit. So I think there's value into you being glued into a story. So those are the things that I like. Did you want me to go into the things I don't like really quick about each?
No. Before we go to like, let me just say, I just to kind of reiterate, I read Lord of the Rings as a teenager. Loved it when I found out they were making movies. Skeptical, because you know how so often a really great book going to
they'll destroy it.
Movie, it's like, no. And I kind of feel like they did that with Rings of Power. I'm not a fan of Rings of Power, but I totally agree with you. One of the best series of movies, in a trilogy, and how wonderful that Peter Jackson was given the creative license to craft all three movies and kind of film them all in one series of rather than come back 10 years later and do another one and then another one, as happened with some other series. But just really, and obviously the book, if you read the book Lord of the Rings and you watch the movies, they're different in a lot of ways. Like, there's a kind of a whimsical, and you actually hear Elvish when you're reading it sounds a certain way when you read it. And you got like characters like Tom Bombadil that get dropped from Lord of the Rings, or he was in The Hobbit. But like some of the whimsical things that show up that are kind of like for kids, or just kind of feel
it's a little more serious in the trilogy. It kind of like serious out a bit. It kind of got rid of the fairy dust feeling.
That's right.
I do think the books did have, to a degree. I didn't read them fully, but I did read The Hobbit and a bit of The Fellowship, and so it did have that a little bit. And I think the movie just took a stance and just took a path. Yeah. And I think it was because of Peter Jackson's comfortability. But
So it stayed close enough that I felt like it was good. Now, when it comes to Game of Thrones, I have not seen any of the show, and but I did read. So when the books first came out, they were, I think there were 2 out when I discovered the first one, and so I read the first 2, and Ned Stark gets killed at the end of the first book, and I just remember going, "What? What?"
Yeah.
I spent the whole book, rooting for this character to survive, and then he gets killed, and so I'm like, all right, that's okay. So. And like his wife gets killed, and like I think one of his sons or multiple of his children get killed, and so and I'm like, okay, so there's the hero coming though. I'm sure there is, and so you read into book 2, and then okay, yeah, it's pretty bleak and pretty horrifying. So read into book 3, and I'm like, okay, at some point, there's gonna be this turn, toward the hero's journey and toward good winning, and I think it was about halfway through book 4, I just quit. I quit. And I stopped. And I was so, I think just emotionally, like I felt betrayed. And now, granted, I never had a contract with George R.R. Martin that he was supposed to write a book with a happy ending. But I realized that I have in me, if I'm going to read a book, if I'm going to invest emotional energy in a story,
right.
That's a story, somebody wrote it, then I need there to be some things in there. And it wasn't there. There was such a moral, like a depravity that was not, it's not that Martin says, hey, the evil is good. It's just that at no point do we get this sense that, that good is going to come out on top. And it feels a lot more like the real world than it does a world that I would escape into and enjoy spending time in. Now, that doesn't mean that if I came back now with different expectations, I might enjoy it more. But the episode that I wanted us to do today is to compare and contrast these 2 moral universes. So you get the moral universe of Tolkien, which it's, some people might call it naive. Some people might call it simplistic, but you've got good, and you've got bad. That bad, as strong and as powerful as bad can possibly be. And, the classic line that Gandalf says, hey, was there ever hope? Only a fool's hope, right? But the good guys are always hoping, and that's what keeps them going. And then, of course, that hope is paid off when they win. And yes, so there's a terrible cost, but hey, the heroes are victorious. And, the big controversy over Game of Thrones is Martin hasn't written the last book. So he hasn't given them the material from which to write the last season. So the script writers wrote their own final ending, and everybody hated it, right? But that's because Martin refused to write it, and I think they're planning to maybe reshoot season 5, and Martin, I think, is signed on to do a reboot of the final season. But we'll see, because how do you land a plane? How do you land it when there's no, you can't have like with wings. How do you? Is it going to be a happy end?
Right.
Will there be an emotional payoff? That's the question. What kind of emotional payoff can we expect to have in a universe where hope doesn't win, where the good guys get killed, where injustice is more the theme than justice, where there's a kind of a like, wow, life is meaningless. And, our last episode, we talked about those movies where the value of life is so low. And when you read Song of Ice and Fire, it's like, nobody's safe. Nobody has plot armor, So, I mean, what are your thoughts? I've shared my beef with Martin's universe.
Well, I think you can kind of find it in the title a little bit too. The song, like of Ice and Fire, 2 conflicting pieces that just end up playing a song. And like, let me give you a little taste of the song that it plays. Where it's like this one, this fire can melt that ice. No, this ice can actually douse that fire. Oh, the blah, 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 right? So it just kind of like this song, right? Whereas with Lord of the Rings, it's like there's a song that's waiting to be played at the end. And you're trying to get to that song because right now there's a suppression of it happening. And it's like the beautiful song you're awaiting and like setting the world right again. And you're like waiting for that payoff to happen. And over on, you know, the Game of Thrones side, it's more just like, well, this is just a view into how things just kind of this and that, and then this and that, and then this and that. And you don't get any sense of like, okay, well, yeah, but eventually it's got to go this way, right? Eventually it's got to go up. Eventually, like you said, the good has to be on top, and that's never given. Or even if the bad were to be on top, just like an anti-villain or whatever you want to call it, or like a, you know, reversal of the story. Because, you know, American movies have always kind of just like, there's always a happy ending and this person gets finally, you know, the resolution they deserve. Whereas like, you know, films from even the British genre, or, you know, if we look overseas at any of those films coming from even back in the day, a lot of them didn't have resolutions and it kind of bothered people. But, you know, it doesn't always have to be like a corny resolution, but just we're always looking for some sort of like triumph of something. Just give us an answer. And it just seems like there's just no end in sight. And it just seems like there's going to be this constant back and forth. And then, you know, Lord of the Rings too, it defines like what is bad by sort of making it ugly. I mean, you know what I mean? Like the orcs are ugly. It's not like the orcs are like beautiful. And now they once were beautiful elves, which is a really cool thing. But I just mean they're ugly. And, you know, it's bad. And it's like, you know, it's dark and it's like, and it's just so easy to see. And it's not corny, but it's just easy to see. And in Game of Thrones, yeah, there's some bad stuff and bad characters you can tell sort of, but they're not ugly. And sometimes you don't even know that they're bad. And most of them are just kind of just like another character. And you're like, wait, so this is not really defined. And it's kind of just like anything happens here. And I think I just kind of got tired of being built into something to then just be let down. And then having no trust in any character that I latched onto after that. And that emotional disappointment works the first few times, and the shock factor of not having the American conflict resolution that you need in a movie to make it an official plot wasn't being delivered. It's innovative at first, and then it just sort of becomes like, okay, so what are we gaining from this? What am I walking away with from this? Right. And I know we mentioned in our last episode just this nihilistic view of like life is sort of meaningless and just whatever. Well, how are you walking away from The Running Man? Like you said, how are you walking away from these things? What are we taking away from these stories, though, that were being presented? And when I watch Lord of the Rings, I cry when I walk away because I'm left with what a story. What a beautiful, beautiful story. And also reflecting on inward of my creator and like, you know, the story of the gospel and just like how beautiful that is and how it just lightly sort of portrayed that in its own way, not being like overly corny and obvious. And then you walk away from Game of Thrones. Let's just pretend season 8 didn't suck. And you walk away from Game of Thrones and you're just like, so what am I supposed to take from this other than there were some cool characters and all the characters that I actually don't like anymore. And, you know, the way the characters evolve is not what I thought. And a lot of people that I actually were kind of into died early on. So what is that? Yeah. And is that a reflection of life? Does it have to be a reflection of life? I mean, I know our lives that we live like do have these stories also in our lives, or where it's like not everything is a perfect, you know, resolution wrapped in a bow thing. And sometimes there is like just like there's a gray that exists that we have to deal with. But
and so I think that I think that these two authors are grappling with the gray with a different set of expectations, right? And so what Tolkien, who was an avowed Christian, what Tolkien had was a confidence that there was a higher good, that if evil is ascendant, you know, kind of winning for a while, this higher good will still prevail, and it prevails as the people who want to see good, as they, you know, fight, you know, to overcome evil. And so then you look over at Martin, and is there a higher good? No, there isn't. There's just people pursuing power, pursuing, and so maybe Ned Stark is the kind of the quintessential, kind of heroic figure in season 1. And he's the guy that we're all rooting for, he's the hand of the king or whatever. And we're saying, hey, he could be the leader. He could be the guy. And then they kill him.
Right.
Right. And so it's like Martin's saying, hey, lest you think that you're gonna have a happy ending here, I'm gonna just kill him right out of the gate. That way, any ideas you had that things are gonna turn out good, turn out for the good, was crush those. Now, the reason I think the show works and the reason that people enjoyed it is because they do latch on to characters and they do start to root for certain outcomes. But there was a funny quip, I think, at one point, like, why are you watching this show if there's nobody to root for? And the answer was, because it's on. At some point you get on into the show and you want to see what happens next. And you want to see what happens next.
Right. And it's innovative to a degree. It's innovative,
it is.
To take the character that you think is going that way and kill him off. I mean, early. That, as a sense, that there's creativity to that. Like, I awarded that, even though I was like, what the, I awarded the creativity there before I knew what was coming, obviously. But
and clearly there are heroic characters, and there is sacrifice, and there are, good people doing good things, and even bad people occasionally doing good things, like Jaime Lannister has kind of a redemption arc, right? Like I am just aware of that. I haven't watched the show, but I'm aware of that from some of the reporting on it. So you have this really messy world that probably looks a lot more like our world, but the question for the viewer is, but do you have this sense that there is an ultimate good behind the mess in this world, right? So is life meaningless? Are we all just, in it for ourselves? And is life just one series of messes after another? Or do you have this sense that life has an ultimate purpose, an ultimate meaning, and that we're all headed toward, either something good, a good outcome, or because we refuse the good, we're headed toward a bad outcome, right? Is there a light and a dark? And should we pursue the light or and reject the dark? And if you have that sense, chances are you inherited it from the Christian faith. You inherited it from this idea that God is good, that he does love, and that even when messy things are happening in the world, that doesn't prove that God isn't real. It doesn't prove that God doesn't love us. But we're able to frame the mess and to say, this is temporary. What did Paul say? I consider that these light momentary afflictions that we are suffering through are nothing compared to the immense weight of glory that will be ours, right? And so we have this sense that this is the mess is temporary, and where we're headed is good and glorious. And so we can put up with, that's why Sam and Frodo put up with the trek through Mordor to toss the ring in, because they believe that through their sacrifice, good things are going to come to the whole world. And of course, they're right. What is the motivation? And I'm not saying that it's a bad story. I'm just saying a very different moral universe. And our viewers are choosing every day. We're choosing the moral universe we choose to live in. Are we living in the one that is framed by good and evil, and we're choosing the good? And, as broken and as messy as our lives are, as sinful as we turn out to be, are we still saying, yeah, but I'm striving? Or are we saying, hey, it's kill or be killed, dog eat dog, so you may as well live it up, try to get as much as you can, and hope you don't get stabbed to death, when you, like Ned Stark was, right?
Right.
So, yeah. So, yeah, what do you think, Will? Like, as we kind of round this episode out, if you were going to pick the world that you wanted to visit, like you get a free, let's say, pass to go visit the world, hang out, talk with the characters, get to know them, and then come back home.
Yeah, it would be Lord of the Rings 1,000%.
But why?
Not only,
but why?
Because if I visited the Game of Thrones world, I'd most certainly make a name for myself for a little while and then get beheaded. Like, I'm not into doing that. And also, like, I don't enjoy, I don't, like, it would just be like, great. So I go over here and then it's freezing cold and I'm with I'm with, the Starks, and like I can hang out there for a little while, maybe because they're like sort of good people, but then I'm gonna watch them all, get their guts split open at a wedding. Like I don't feel like doing that. If I go to Lord of the Rings, I know I'm getting to witness heroes at work. I'm getting to witness, victory. Speaking with characters that I'd be able to say like, wow, how did you overcome that? How did you, right? In Game of Thrones, I'd be speaking with people that are just after power and probably are after my neck, like it's not a very inviting world. It's a very like, just do as much as you can. Cause life is fleeting. So might as well just do what you can, visit that brothel and then die. It's just stupid. It's kind of just like it. And you know what? The series was done that way too. It was kind of like junk food, in a way, because I really did love the series, but it was just filled with so much junk and unnecessary. But it's preying on the junk food that, we kind of consume as viewers, and just toying with just watching straight, pornography on your television. Like where's the line with that creativity? And just, it was just over the top. It was just like, it was ridiculous sometimes, and it made it hard to watch at certain points. And so I couldn't even really invest just the world itself that they were establishing that way too visually. Cause I think Peter Jackson did such a great job establishing this world, and like, this is what it looked like. This is the feeling. This is what Hobbiton felt like. This is the music. This is the kind of, it was so like carefully put together. And in this Game of Thrones world, it's just like, I don't know what was going, like each place was different. It was kind of like cold and just not like likable. It's like, you don't want to be there. It's all in this in-between state of like, this place is going to burn down tomorrow, or this place could be ransacked tomorrow. Anyway, where would you want to go?
Well,
man, I can probably guess.
I definitely agree. Yeah, I would want to hang out in Middle Earth, go on a walk with Gandalf, or, hang out in the Shire for a little while. But I think it's important that we, that we see the value in, shows like Game of Thrones, that we see the value in that it provides a foil or a contrast to the ideal, that we're all pursuing, and then that we are making decisions, right? So Tolkien and Martin, they both chose the worlds that they would write, and then they wrote those worlds, and we enjoy their creative effort, right? We enjoy it. And we enjoy them, both of these, for different reasons. Each of us as human beings are choosing the moral universe that we want to project out into the lives of the people around us,
Right.
Am I going to be the kind of person who, I'm not going to be an Aragorn, I'm not going to be the hero. I'm not going to be, vanquishing the great villain. But do I want to be heroic? Do I want to be the kind of person who brings those kind of values into my life, into my relationships? Or do I want to kind of just be the person that like, hey, well, everything's going to burn, everybody's going to die. So enjoy it while you can, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. And what I guess I want our viewers to just realize is, you love Game of Thrones. That's great. But recognize that living in that universe, if we brought that universe into our universe, just how bleak it would be, just how hopeless it would be, and how like every choice that we're making, that's the story that we're living by. And so at any rate, I'm not trying to moralize here. I'm just really trying to encourage people to think it through, like the stories behind the stories that we enjoy reading and we enjoy partaking in, whether it's through literature or on the big screen or on the television. And just to add,
because even to our last episode too, you had mentioned the fact that, are we making the choice for the individual or for the greater good? And so like in the Game of Thrones world, we're really making the choice for the individual, seeking after power of just every man for himself, really. That's what I saw. And in Lord of the Rings, you have everyone making decisions and whatever for the greater good. So like,
and you mentioned the ugly monsters are the ones that are the pursuing just immediate chaos.
Just like
one they want to destroy, kill and destroy. Yeah,
you try to be more like
it is
Pippin.
simplistic. Yeah, right. Who is naive, right? And he's like the classic naive, fool of a took.
Fool of a took. That's who I am. Yeah.
Yeah, and so, but better to be a fool of a took than to be, an orc trying to slash and kill and burn, right? Or to even be Sauron with all his power. But so, at the risk of sounding simplistic, at the risk of sounding a little Pollyanna, I think it is okay for us to say this is great literature. This is great literature, but I prefer this moral universe. And I don't want to live in this one over here. I think it's okay to say that. And then to say to ourselves, viewer, for you to say to yourself, I want to be a part of creating, or at least, propagating the values of a universe that I would want to live in, rather than one that becomes more and more miserable for everybody. So at any rate, we are going to do a Christmas episode, I'm hoping at some point. And since it is a Christmas season, we'll come around to that. So I did the little tease with the elves and the tree at the beginning. Hopefully we'll come around and do some actual Christmas at some point. But folks, we're so glad that you joined us again for this episode. Slap a like if you liked it. Comment in the comments section. If you saw something in Lord of the Rings that we didn't see, or you saw something in Game of Thrones that we didn't see, you got to keep the conversation going, and we appreciate spending time with you. And we'll see you next time.